Here's a look at some of the most disturbing pieces of art found throughout the internet. What begins as murky green brushstrokes quickly transforms into one of the most bone-chilling pieces of art you may ever place your eyes upon. Although our brains are telling us that this is a human figure, everything about its appearance makes us feel incredibly disturbed. For starters, the figure's face is painted with a dark silhouette that gives them a defined human shape, but one completely lacking detail. The obvious explanation could be that this figure is wearing a bodysuit, but if that's the case, it still doesn't explain the muddied and unnaturally occurring greens, grays, and oranges that make up its zombie-like skin. Likely the main reason our brains find this person to be so unsettling. Their off-white eyes sit sunken inside deep crimson sockets, creating a jarring contrast of colors that forces you to uncomfortably maintain eye contact with them. Finally, we follow the figure's elongated nose that sits between rough and scabby patches of blue and yellow, more details that put this already mysterious figure on a plane completely unknown to our own. This painting, fittingly titled Stranger in a Strange Land, comes to us from Karen S. Conley, an artist based in New Mexico whose work includes painting, photography, and sometimes a hybrid of the two. Measuring 8 by 10 inches, Stranger in a Strange Land is featured in the figurative work section of Conley's website. This section is comprised of oil paintings with an emphasis on portraiture and people. However, Stranger in a Strange Land is somewhat of a notable outlier when compared to the rest of Conley's body of work, featuring figures with real names and seemingly real faces. Given the title of the piece, it would appear that Conley herself chose to leave a considerable amount of ambiguity with the figure, especially when you take into consideration she likely created this character from her imagination as opposed to observation. Schizophrenia is defined as a mental condition involving the breakdown of the relationship between thought, emotion, and behavior, leading to delusions and mental fragmentation. And if schizophrenia were to manifest itself physically, I think it would take the form of this piece. In this image, we see a monochromatic, ghastly shell of a human with an expression so loud it's as though we can hear it screaming in agony despite the silence of the canvas. The image's color, or rather, its absence, adds another layer of discomfort, as this lack of color makes the overall piece, much like the figure, seem devoid of life itself. Thousands of spindle-like pencil strokes that are both delicate yet coarse emphasize the struggle between sanity and insanity this person may be afflicted with. The placement of their pea-sized pupils make it uncertain whether this individual is trying to meet the viewer's gaze or stare ambiguously into the distance. Instead, we are immediately drawn to the figure's nose and mouth, the places with the largest area of contrast. The figure's stark black nose and strikingly white mouth hardly make sense if you take into consideration the source of light that starts at the head and trickles down into the wrinkles of the face. Because of this, it's as if the principles of reality don't apply to this figure. Perhaps it is a ghost, an enigma, or what's left of someone whose soul died long ago. We don't appear to be misled by what this image was trying to convey, as its title, Schreck, translates from German to mean fright. But despite its German-derived name, its creator, Miriam Kahn, is a Swiss-born artist. Kahn, born in 1949 and still practicing art 75 years later, has had her art featured in numerous galleries around the world, including the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Tate Modern Museum in London, as well as museums in Madrid and Warsaw, just to name a few. I stumbled upon Schreck in a gallery catalog from Kahn's 2021 to 2022 art exhibition, Me as Happening, hosted at the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery in Ontario, Canada. But emotional horror isn't the only driving force behind her work, as the other half of her paintings tend to explore physical horror, or more adult-oriented themes. Not quite my cup of tea. One such piece, titled F Abstraction, was recently at the center of controversy in France just 2 years ago, as a group of protesters demanded it be removed from view at Paris's Tokyo Palace for containing subject matter that was too obscene. Despite Kahn's minimalist figures and my censorship, I think there's still enough present for you to get the idea of why it caused a problem. Ultimately, the French board rejected the motion and allowed the painting to stay, but in an ironic twist of fate, it ended up getting vandalized anyway. I've previously stated the role color plays in helping to convey the eeriness of a piece, but what happens when the subject itself is just downright terrifying? Once again, we bear witness to the wonders of art, that even though this creature is clearly not based in reality, we still perceive it as a living thing. It has 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, even a pair of shoulders, and that's enough for our brains to register it as a human, albeit the most satanic human you may have ever had the displeasure of seeing. But it's not just the unsightly placement of its facial features that makes our skin crawl, but the color of the figure that makes it almost unbearable to look at. Its raw flesh is covered in rusty earth tones with a rough, scratchy texture peppered throughout, giving this figure the nauseating appearance of being bloodied and scarred. With grisly teeth slightly barred and a pupilless gaze from small pebble-like eyes, this abomination, born from an artist's imagination, is nothing short of something ripped straight from a horror movie. With no description and a title as ambiguous as the subject matter itself, Ghost of the City is the name given to this 11x14 acrylic and mixed media painting by artist Grant Fust. Fust, an artist based in Salt Lake City, Utah, is clearly no stranger when it comes to illustrating pure nightmare fuel, with over 2,000 pieces of art on display throughout his social media. So, for someone who has literally painted thousands of images, it's likely Ghost of the City doesn't contain any sort of hidden message or underlying meaning, other than to seriously freak out the viewer. Or, perhaps the meaning of Fust's artistic pursuit as a whole is for his audience to draw their own conclusions about any one of his pieces. For example, Ghost of the City makes me wonder if this hellish figure is a ghost itself, or if the figure is a manifestation of a ghost town, abandoned, forgotten, and left to rot away, a metaphor to mirror its grotesque appearance. Our final piece, conceptually, is the most straightforward of the bunch, but visually, I believe, the most disturbing. One of the reasons, especially when you compare it to the other portraits, is that this is undoubtedly a real-life human being, the most distinguishable from the group. At first glance, this could be a self-portrait, but given the unsettling nature of its visual craftsmanship, perhaps there's an underlying message the artist wishes to communicate, similar to Miriam Khan's piece. We once again see a chromatic color scheme from the white of the canvas and the usage of black ink, executed with an immeasurable amount of minuscule hatches, a majority of which appear no longer than a grain of rice. These individual lines join together to create the illusion of a ragged, unstable man, scribbled to life with a stone-cold confrontational stare, a truly chilling result of the effect that art can have on the viewer. The other images are unsettling, yes, but we know that they're from the imagination, that they aren't real, or that certain aspects of them have been altered and exaggerated. But in this case, it's the realness I find to be most disturbing, because after all, it's not the demons from our dreams or the monsters in our minds, but humans who are capable of true evil. Despite all the speculation, the frightening appearance of this artwork is in fact pure coincidence. Although the other 3 images could have been created to evoke some sort of emotional response within the viewer, whether intentional or not, this piece, simply titled Mood 30, is evidently nothing more than one man's etching of his own face. In other words, a self-portrait, as speculated earlier. Irish artist Daniel Lipstein has created a vast array of paintings, etchings, and lithographs over his ongoing 20-year career, and in that collection is a smaller collection of over 70 other mood self-portraits, with number 73 being the most recent at the time of this recording. Interestingly, Lipstein's first mood portrait was completed in 2016, appearing drastically different from iterations completed throughout the almost decade-long project. It reminds me of the one photo every day time lapses people create to document how their life and appearance changes over the years, although with only 73 portraits, this is clearly not an everyday type of exercise for Lipstein. However, I like to imagine this is Lipstein's way of capturing himself the same way someone else would using photographs, but since he's an artist, he uses a canvas as opposed to a camera lens. Whatever the reason, 4 artists decided to express themselves through an array of undeniably unsettling imagery, their work has certainly provided us with a great conversation about the subjectiveness and interpretations the world of art has to offer, and that our brains sometimes gain a concerning amount of enjoyment from looking at some straight-up disturbing stuff.